Hi everybody, my name is Diego. I'm the program manager of curriculum here at Lambda, and in this video we're going to be talking about block strategy and how to kick arguments. So at this point, you're either in the JV or varsity division, and you're trying to figure out what to do when you have a multitude of arguments in your negative arsenal. So you maybe have topicality, you have disads, you have a counterplan, maybe you have the critique in there as well. You can't just like ignore them and act like they never happened if you decide not to go for them in your final speech. You have to go about kicking the argument, which just means you're conceding a certain portion of the debate to make sure that that argument goes away. You want to make sure you're able to get out of those arguments effectively because if you don't, there is a way that the affirmative can use them to their advantage if you're not backing out of arguments in a strategic manner. So we're going to talk about block strategy, how to make your 2NC/1NR speeches much more cohesive and set up the 2NR for victory, as well as how to properly kick arguments as well. So let's talk about block advice really first. Recap. The block refers to the back-to-back 2 and C1 in our speeches. Since the affirmative gets the first and last speech, the negative gets a full 13 minutes to make arguments that the one-ear must respond to in 5 minutes. Splitting the block refers to dividing up negative responsibilities so that the negative team can get in as many arguments as possible. At this point, you're in the JV division. You should be assigning the one and R a certain responsibility. So, for example, if you're only going for a counterplan disad case, the 2 NC should be, for example, counterplan and case. The 1 NR should be the disad. If you have disad counterplan topicality case, you might want the 2 NC to be counterplan, disad, and then the 1 NR to be case and topicality. Up to you. You might even want to instruct the negative to kick, or you might want to instruct your partner to kick a certain argument in the block itself. So, for example, maybe you're running disad counterplan topicality and then some case arguments. You decide the topicality is not really going your way. You're going to tell your partner, hey, in the 1 NR, take the disad and topicality, but don't talk about topicality. Kick it. All right. Um, so let's talk about how to split the block. Ultimately, it's a matter of personal choice, but the general rule of thumb is you want to give the 2 NR at least two routes to victory. The point of reading multiple arguments as part of your negative arsenal is to keep the affirmative on their toes, to keep yourself flexible so that in the 2 NR you're able to go for whatever position you want and still win the round. We talked about this already, but for example, you might want to extend counterplan disad T in the block, so the 2 NR could be either counterplan disad case or just T. Or you might want to extend the disad in K, so the 2 NR could be disad case or K plus case. These give you different routes to a win, but they must be done strategically. They must be done in a way so that if you're backed into a corner and you're forced to go for a certain position, then you have to be confident in yourself to be able to go for either one if you're backed into that corner. So there are some things to think about when splitting the block. Watch out for contradictions. So, for example, since you're in the JV division, you should be familiar with the critique. Extending a critique that criticizes capitalism and then a dissent that says we got to preserve economic growth is probably contradictory. The affirmative can make theory arguments for why this should not be allowed. So it's known as performative contradictions. They might make arguments for why these contradictions are a reason to reject the team. If you're unfamiliar with theory stuff, you should watch the theory lecture just to get a semblance of what I'm talking about. But they can make theory arguments for why multiple worlds or why a contradiction should not be allowed in debate. Or the other thing that can happen too is that the affirmative can implicate your responses. They might agree with the economy dissent that the app crashes the economy, but that means that they no longer link to the CAPK, and then here's reasons why economic decline is not really that big of a deal. Just make sure that whatever you are choosing as your combination in your block strategy, either be prepared to justify with a theory debate or consider going for another strategy, or even just defend, like again, defend your strategy. Don't pigeon, don't get yourself trapped in a situation where you don't want to be in. Extend what you are confident in. You might be forced to go for a certain argument based on how the affirmative answers them. So you have to be able to go for any off case you end up reading. So the 1 NC should not just be disad counterplan topicality K every single off case under the world just because uh like you want to do it to like mess up your opponent's time. If your opponent is smart about the way they handle multiple off case, they will make strategic concessions. They will make it so that you are forced to either go for all of it or go for a position that you're not necessarily confident in. So extend what you are confident in. If you know that the counterplan and disset is your bread and butter, you probably don't want to think about the critique. If you know that you can go for either one, then yeah, put both of them in there. Um, Okay, let's talk about how to kick arguments. Okay. Making the strategic decision to abandon certain off-case arguments and narrow the debate down to your best arguments. That's essentially what the role of kicking an argument in debate is. You must explicitly concede a defensive argument in order to properly kick an argument. So, rule of thumb that you must always follow is if you're going to kick an argument, you should always be conceding a form of defense to make sure that your opponent can't claim any offense on that. We'll go over an example of what that can look like. Uh, but just so you know, conceding offense is terrible. It gives the AF always a new advantage that they can leverage against you in the later speeches. Um, if you're unfamiliar with the difference between defense and offense, there's a video on the page, I believe, under the rookie folder that you can watch. But otherwise, quick recap. Offense scores points, defense prevents the opponents from scoring. Arguments that deny another opponent's claims are defensive. Arguments that reverse, such as a turn on a disad or a case turn, are offensive. Arguments that minimize, such as saying that the impact is not as big as what the other side thinks, are defensive. And then arguments that say your stuff outweighs their impact is offensive. It shows why you should come first. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go over some of these examples to show you what it looks like to kick an argument. So remember, we're looking for a response from the affirmative that we can concede to make sure that we don't get in any trouble later. As the negative, you read this China dissent. This China dissent says uniqueness. China's soft power is high now. Link something about the app does mining and mining takes away their soft power. Internal link, no soft power equals loss in legitimacy for China, and the impact is Taiwan invasion goes nuclear. Okay, that's the dissent that the negative read. 2AC gets up and reads these four answers. One, non-unique, China soft power is already cooked. Okay. Second, no link, US does not take it away. Three, link turn. The US boosts China's soft power. Four, no impact. Taiwan war does not go nuclear. So we're going to work through these answers really quick and see if I conceded this as the negative to get out of this disset. I've decided that this disset sucks. I'd rather go for something else in my 1 and C. I need to get away from this disset as much as possible to make sure that nothing about what the affirmative says impacts the rest of the debate. All right. What if I agreed with the app that said non-unique China soft power is cooked? If I said concede non-unique China soft power cooked. If that's the case, that means that the dissad never mattered, according to the negative responses. So if we can see that the non-unique argument that China's soft power is already cooked, the disside either happens inevitably or it's not a result of the affirmative, which means no link or impact was inevitable. That's not a reason. That means that the app can't claim any offense. We're conceding a defensive argument that denies the disside in the first place. If we concede a no link, the US does not take it away. Again, we could concede this as well to make the disside go away. Link turn, the US boosts China's soft power. If the negative conceded this, right? They're trying to say we don't want to go for this dissent anymore. We just want it to disappear. If I concede it as the negative, oh yeah, the US and the plan actually boost China's soft power. That is a new advantage that you're giving the negative side, or there's the new advantage that you're giving the affirmative side as the negative if you read this dissent and you conceded that link turn. If that's true, the affirmative has their advantages from the 1AC and they have a third or second advantage based on that third answer right there. So you definitely do not want to concede this argument. It gives the affirmative a leg up. Okay, four, no impact. Taiwan war does not go nuclear. I can concede that. I can concede that, and I can say we're kicking the China dissad. We're going to concede non-unique, no link, and no impact. It means that the impact is not as big as the dissad said it was, and the affirmative doesn't even cause it. So there's no offense they can generate. They cannot go for this link turn as a separate advantage to the 1AC. Now you can go focus on your counterplan or dissad, or your second dissad, or your critique, or whatever it is you wanted to go for. So yeah, that's an example, highlighting these to show you which ones you can concede, which ones you can't. There is one exception to kicking arguments. The only argument you do not need to explicitly kick is topicality. There is no offense that the affirmative can derive off of topicality. So let's say, for example, you're the negative. You read topicality, you say the app's not topical. The affirmative says, we meet counter interpretation. Here are reasons why the counter interpretation is better. You don't need to say anything. Like you don't even need to say concede we meet. Because if the affirmative wins topicality, all they have established is that yes, we should be allowed to talk about the 1AC. That's not an advantage. That's not a reason why they should win the debate. Even if they win that their counter interpretation is a better model of debate, doesn't matter. The role of the negative in the topicality debate is just to show that the affirmative is either topical or not topical. If they are topical, the debate can continue. If they're not, then the debate should end and the judge to vote negative. But if the affirmative wins the T debate, that just means they've won, that they should be allowed to debate. That's not a reason why they should win that the 1AC is a good idea. So for disads, counterplans, critiques, any case argument that the negative wants to get out of. You have to explicitly concede something in order to kick out of it properly. Uh, Topicality is the only flow that you do not have to do that for. Okay. Hopefully you found that helpful and yeah, continue refining your block strategies.